Welcome to the School of Love, the place where miracles are normal. Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to the School of Love, the place where we learn practical tools based on scientific research and our own experiences towards improving ourselves, living life to its fullest, and contributing to the best of our abilities to the world around us. I'm Dr. Grajdian, and I'm a professor of media studies and anthropology at Hiroshima University. In my free time, I'm doing my best to guide you in building up a life of fulfillment, contentment, and joy while applying lessons learned in school to overcome the difficulties, challenges, and insecurities of the real world. In today's video, I talk about the animation movie Angry Birds, produced by Columbia Pictures and Rovio Animation and distributed by Sonya Pictures, releasing in 2016. This video critically observes the contents and the audience's perception of Angry Birds on the background of their Japanese theatrical releases and hermeneutically analyzes its impact both on the local mass media and on the cinema visitors in terms of their understanding of self and other, as well as in reference to visions of the future. In the year 2016, two animation works produced outside of Japan, Zootopia and Angry Birds, also known as Angry Birds the movie, were released on the Japanese market, already oversaturated with domestic entertainment productions, animated and live action. What these two animation movies had in common, what made them stick out from among numerous similar productions, were two very different, one might even say opposite visions on community life and how this community life could interact with newcomers. As described later on in great detail, while a strategy involving social cultural detachment and economic political isolationism seems more appealing, the historical philosophy of expansion and diversification appears more in alignment with global irreversible trends. And now, first things first, that is, two disclaimers. The first disclaimer serves to strongly emphasize the fact that this YouTube channel, The School of Love, is not part of my educational and research activities at Hiroshima University. It is nonetheless part of my privilege, joy, and sense of duty to propagate and implement knowledge, information, as well as motivation and inspiration outside the limited framework of academic endeavors. Together, we can build up a better tomorrow for as many of us as possible. The second disclaimer relates to the fact that I'm a trained musician and musicologist, not a psychologist, therapist, or counselor. The idea I am sharing in my videos reflect my deep-going preoccupation with life, my own life and other people's lives, and express the results of my experiences, research, and for better or for worse, my failures, as well as my recovery from those failures, recovery which is still ongoing. The ideas expressed in the videos on this channel, The School of Love, cannot and may not and must not replace the consultation with specialists in whichever areas of your life you might have questions or you might struggle with. If you are new to the channel, at this moment I would like to please consider subscribing, sharing, liking, and commenting. Thank you very, very much. This helps us not only with that mysterious algorithm which seems to dominate the YouTube galaxy, but also with contributing to the expansion of the community of humans doing their best to impact positively the world and those around them by discovering their authentic selves and living life wholeheartedly. Thanks again. The year 2016 saw the release of two animation works produced outside of Japan, which seemed to challenge the status quo on the volatile and highly competitive Japanese market. Zootopia, the story of an utopian universe in which mammals, both prey and predators, coexist in peace and harmony. And Angry Birds, telling about the brutal intrusion of pigs into the highly tranquil village of a secluded island with flightless birds as inhabitants sharing a happy, undisturbed life. Both Zootopia and Angry Birds came on the background of the lurking xenophobia and isolationist policies in wealthy countries, with leading politicians increasingly under pressure by frightened citizens to reinforce measures to stop the wave of newcomers flooding from poorer areas of the planet towards the affluent Northwest. This video draws on empirical observations of the Japanese movie market, as well as on theoretical analysis of the visual material, and searches for answers to the questions regarding the validity of the two options: the dream of peaceful coexistence or the vision of an isolated community thriving in itself, from the perspective of the current historical stage. In doing so, I proceed in two steps. Firstly, I pursue a detailed presentation and analysis of Angry Birds with particular focus on the issues of conformity and apparent harmony resulting from unquestioned submission of oneself to the rules and regulations of the community. The discrimination against any upsetting element which sticks out goes completely unacknowledged, or, if ever perceived, accepted as a necessary price paid for the well being of the conformist whole. In the second part, I critically observe the animation work on the background of the Japanese circumstances in an attempt to see both the positive and the negative aspects of this approach. As to be shown in the course of the phenomenological analysis, there is no absolute way to advance through history and to search for meaning as a nation and as an individual. What seems to be the solution in one era mostly proves wrong in another one. Much more important or a flexible attitude and a core set of beliefs and values, which can guide both nations and individuals throughout the waves of self-definition and internationalization. The mass media landscape of recent years has been suffering a recurrent backlash, which hardly allows for creativity and freedom of expression in a world more concerned with public image than with artistic excellence. More than any media, the animated medium seems to move swiftly along the interdictions and restrictions imposed by political correctness, and to find that aesthetic ideological space which allows for messages to penetrate the walls of superficiality. For the past 15 to 20 years, I have been inadvertently pursuing a form of so-called applied anthropology, as promoted, among many others, by Anne Allison and Christine Kondo, and more recently by Simon Sinek. It is a combination between everyday lifestyle and research, in which the investigator, in this case myself, serves as the main subject of his or her own research endeavor, while keenly observing its counterpart, in this case Japanese audiences and their relation with the social cultural environment. The major difference to the classical participatory observation is the fact that in participatory observation, the observed phenomena used to occur generally in groups of humans belonging to a different cultural circle or geographical sphere than the researcher, and took place without a prior theoretical formulation of the expected results and impact on further areas. In case of applied anthropology, the point of departure serves as a clear orientation entity and incorporates considerable amounts of prior preparation, both theoretical and methodological, so that the result, while not being entirely predictable, is to a certain extent estimated in terms of its relevance for larger segments of the human life and activity. Methodologically, participatory observation and hermeneutical interpretation are the two pillars of the analysis, which validate the phenomenological experience and give strength to the resulting statements. Parallel to this phenomenological approach, I have been pursuing what might be described as an empirical study, which refers to informal discussions with consumers of animation works about what interests and moves them, and a close observation of their reactions to my questions and explanations. As it turned out, introducing Zootopia and Angry Birds as the two animation movies released in 2016 by non-Japanese producers, with their exquisite graphic design and its plain retelling of history, employing simple characters with whom viewers can easily identify, held much greater potential to make comprehensible the intrinsically complicated dynamics of the Japanese geopolitics, of generating financial gains via its entertainment medium under half-hearted governmental surveillance, usually known under the more generous label of cultural imperialism, while promoting soft power as a new means to climb the ladder of international recognition, than explaining elaborate theories of cultural analysis. I became genuinely curious as to why this was happening. Parallel with this fieldwork consisting of applied anthropology involving participatory observation characterized by phenomenological experience and the empirical collection of data, I have intensively researched recent work in anthropology and post-colonial studies, cultural studies and media studies, which led me into the less chartered territory of anthropology of media and how humans interact with media on a daily basis, and pushing notions of identity, plurality of options, and individual freedom at the center of my research endeavor. On a deeper level, the research meant starting to think on how people give in unconditionally to the overwhelming temptations and delusions of instant gratification created by mainstream media, or in less common cases, on how they resist the almighty media and its infiltration of all domains of life. Unlike in the case of Japanese animation, the academic literature on Western animation has been mainly focused on the contents and their relevance in a socio-economic perspective in their countries of origin. The current video locates Angry Birds in the landscape of Japanese media and their clash against a very strong domestic view on the function of the entertainment industry and cultural consumption. At this point, it is still premature to release a general forecast regarding the direction of new media in the next decade. But as for classical media, of which cinema is an important segment, the thin line between bringing comfort and challenging ingrained thinking patterns will continue to be a powerful delimitation element. Furthermore, as the Japanese experience shows, the increasing production of low-level movies with pure entertaining purposes loses its appeal under international pressure, where competitiveness and viewers' appreciation are gradually becoming decisive factors in the success of a mediatic work. As to be shown in greater detail later on, between the colorful utopia of a perfect coexistence in accordance with the principal unity within diversity as displayed in Zootopia, and the bleak vision of a closeted community with little room for individual peculiarities and freedom as displayed in Angry Birds, there is a huge range of existential nuances to be taken into consideration. The Japanese experience shows that the walk on extremes is not only dangerous but also self-destructive and implies a very high toll on the dynamics of the society in which this occurs. Perhaps is a balancing act on the middle way a more suitable option, with respect for those who are different in their own fashion and with gentle acceptance towards those for whom perfectly fitting in, if that is ever possible, represents the viable life attitude. Thus, the principle all for one and one for all, but only among ourselves, as enticing as it might seem at first glance, loses its brightness and opens the gate for warmer, softer encounter with the others. The two contrasting principles displayed by Zootopia and Angry Birds, unity within diversity and all for one and one for all, but only among ourselves, are symptomatic for the tense polarities defining current times. In openly addressing the advantages and disadvantages of such options, as well as courageously disclosing the infinite spectrum of nuances between these extremities, the producing teams of these two animation works provide deep insights into the workings of late modernity, its challenges, its fears, and its sometimes unexpected solutions. Angry Birds is a computer-animated comedy movie released in Finland and the United Kingdom on May 13, 2016, and in the United States on May 20th the same year. Also known as The Angry Birds movie, the plot is based on Rovio Entertainment's eponymous video game series, and it was produced by Columbia Pictures and Rovio Animation, and distributed by Sony Pictures Releasing. It was directed by the debutant directors Clay Kaitis and Fergal Rayleigh. The film received mixed reviews from critics due to reasons explained later on, and was a box office success, grossing over $400 million and becoming the second highest grossing movie of all time worldwide to be based on a video game behind Warcraft. Angry Birds is at the same time the most successful Finnish produced movie of all times. In Japan, where it was released on October 1st, 2016, it registered a mediocre success at the box office, which is to be comprehended mainly in the light of its overtly common message of protecting the secluded community of peaceful inhabitants against the aggressive outsiders. A message which, while it finds deep support in conservative Japanese media and citizens, as well as the political establishment, had little echo in the awareness of Japanese cinema visitors, who would expect more progressive and open-minded messages from foreign products of the entertainment industry. The plot of Angry Birds is quite linear. A reclusive, temperamental outcast bird named Red lives in a village on Bird Island with other flightless birds. When his temper causes a premature hatching of another bird's egg, he is sentenced to take an anger management class. Red's classmates, Chuck, who is hyperactive and can move at hypervelocity, and Bump, who can cause explosions with his anger and fear, try to befriend him, but he avoids them. One day, a boat docks at the island's shore, damaging Red's house. The birds are greeted by green-colored pigs and their captain, Leonard, who claim to be peaceful explorers, bringing offerings of friendship. However, as the time passes and the festivities abound, it becomes clear that the pigs' intentions might not be that honorable. It turns out that, in fact, they want to steal the birds' eggs and eat them. Confronted with the disappearance of the eggs, the birds must choose between laying new eggs and giving up on the stolen ones, or fighting for rescuing the stolen eggs. Although initially they wanted to choose the first option, Red encourages them to fight for their unborn kids, and after uselessly looking for help from the mighty eagle, who appears to be overweight, self-absorbed, leading the life of a slacker without having flown in years, they set on a journey to save the eggs from the piggy island. They return victorious, with Red as their leader, and reconstruct the vandalized village, while Red moves in the house repaired by the birds in the center of the village. In spite of its financial success, Angry Birds received international mixed reviews, ranging from pretty thin gruel through pointless up to just fall. However, with a funny, vivacious script and with brightly colored and appealing animation, the ideological shortcomings migrated into the background, at least at first view. In other words, which are the problems brought to the viewer's attention and awareness, and why precisely are there something to focus on in the first place? There are three main issues to be taken into account. The first issue is the sense of overprotective community in Angry Birds, isolated from the rest of the world and living in undisturbed bliss under the undisputed reassurance of an almighty instance, the mighty eagle, and his all too self-absorbed, self-appointed representative. Any social element like Red, who sticks out due to unusual traits, is short-handedly excluded from the communal life. Like the Japanese society, happy conformism and a total lack of self-awareness are basic attitudes towards living a harmonious life. But what happens to those who are just a little bit different from the rest of the community? Open discrimination in the form of ignorance and oblivion seems to be the answer. However, it is the fresh nonconformist instinct of the secluded Red, who clearly sees the danger, warns the others, and ultimately offers the authentic solution of fighting for one's rights and loved ones, not the superficial option of giving up and hiding behind cowardice and lack of vision. The second issue is the blind trust in outsiders, which turns out to be plainly wrong. Like the Japanese society, for way too long secluded in itself and in the vain delusion of being able to live and thrive far away from the confrontations of the world at large, the inhabitants of the Bird Island have long forgotten what it means to openly communicate with strangers and to show a minimum amount of foresight and caution. Their final solution after the victorious return with the rescued eggs, a softly veiled symbol for energy and future, is to close themselves again and to keep on ignoring the development of the outer world. Not even Red, with all his temper and tantrums, is able to overcome or burst this paradigm. He has new close friends now and has been accepted by the community, but his vision of life and of his position in life have not changed. The third issue in Angry Birds is the absence of the suggestion of a constructive solution. Bluntly put, from the beginning to the end of the movie, there is no development of the characters or the emergence of an existential philosophy, which would allow them to send a specific message to audiences, overcoming the fourth wall. In life, there is a middle way between completely closing the boundaries to all strangers and indiscriminately opening the gates to all newcomers. There is the infinite spectrum of nuances between black and white, which does not appear in Angry Birds, and which resists any progress towards a tomorrow more positively oriented to communication and understanding. Or might a suggestion of this middle way be viewed in the final mid-credit scene, as the three bluebirds use the slingshot to launch themselves out toward the ocean? Perhaps the scene is a symbol of escape from a community suffocated by its own self-indulgency and complacency and threatened to collapse not under the external pressure of opening up to new forces and impulses, but under the internal indifference and fear towards change, like the society on the Japanese archipelago. The current video has critically observed one of the two extreme tendencies visible in the world at the present, as reflected in one popular animation movie released internationally in the year 2016. On the one hand, there is the "we are all one big global family" way of thinking, encompassed by the unity within diversity principle, which deletes differences and boundaries, so necessary for individual fulfillment and a strong sense of self, the type described in Zootopia. On the other hand, there is the all for one and one for all, but only among ourselves tendency, strongly moving against the all-encompassing globalizing wave, as portrayed in Angry Birds. In Angry Birds, the socio-economic policy marked by detachment from the global events and focusing on isolationism as main means to cope with the historical reality appears as successful in fighting the outsiders, who are keen on stealing the eggs, a powerful symbol of future and of energy. Whatever this energy might mean in practical terms: existential vitality, nature resources, biological freshness. When confronted with a threat represented by common enemies, coming from the outside of the self-sufficient community, its members instantly become one homogeneous group with a clear, unique goal, regardless of how estranged or fragmented they might have been previously. In theory, and in the imaginary universe of the animated medium, this seems like an ideal scenario, joyfully driving into oblivion personal differences and the fact that individual inconsistencies cannot be deleted that easily. In real life, though, things get messy when individuals, previously hardly aware of each other's presence or bluntly denying each other's presence, are supposed to work all of a sudden together towards a common goal. Particularly issues of leadership and planning tend to turn nasty, when more often than not it becomes clear that those traditionally in charge might not have the best ideas for solutions or the most feasible plan. When talking to Japanese viewers of the two animation works, what struck me the most was that there was no person who would have appreciated both movies. Viewers were clearly divided into two groups, which faithfully corresponded to the main political affiliations in Japan: the conservative ones, who plead for a preservation of Japan and the Japanese people outside of the world's adventures, in the name of a glorious past, own powerful traditions, and ethnic homogeneity. And the progressive ones, who are open to international influences and fresh inputs coming from abroad, especially in terms of technical skills. What is important to note, though, is that the members of the second category do not believe or feel so out of an innate rush of tolerance or ideological awakening, but out of sheer pragmatism, as a result of watching the news, distinctly on non-Japanese channels, and comprehending that Japan's isolationism must change for a sustainable future as an autonomous nation-state. Moreover, there was some amount of frustration expressed by most members of both categories due to the fact that Japan, or better said, Japan's economic political elite, whom the general population had trusted blindly until the economic collapse at the beginning of the 1990s, had not been able to either avoid, by means of technological development, being practically forced to join the global scene, and to do it, if it did choose to do so, on its own terms, or to play a more significant role in the historical events which have been leading up to the current world power structure, so that it possesses a stronger voice in the choir of global leaders. Either way, the fact that Japan has no other choice than to follow the general trend and to open itself up so that it becomes part of the whole conglomerate seems rather frustrating than fulfilling. I believe that regardless of domestic discourses and popular representations of national homogeneity, uniqueness, and glorious past, deeply engraved in overhauled slogans, Japan Inc. must learn to see the world outside of its imaginary or not borders, in a similar way as most of the people on this planet see it. A common space full of splendor and beauty, full of potential adventures and discoveries. The rest depends on what we choose to do about it. So that would be from me for today. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening to me. And I'm looking forward to welcoming you very soon again. Love and peace to you all.